Ethan Cole never expected to find someone hiding in his house. It started with small things: food disappearing from his kitchen, strange sounds in the middle of the night, and the feeling that something was not quite right. At first, he thought he was imagining it. Maybe he forgot to lock the door. Maybe a stray animal got inside. But deep down, he knew something was wrong. One night, he decided to find out the truth. Ethan lived alone in a quiet neighborhood just outside the city. He had moved there a year ago, wanting a peaceful life after leaving his stressful job as an engineer. His house was small but comfortable, with a basement he rarely used. To catch the intruder, Ethan set up a small camera in the kitchen. It wasn't the best quality, but it would do the job. He placed a few pieces of bread on the counter, then went to bed, pretending nothing was wrong. The next morning, Ethan checked the footage. His heart pounded as he watched. At around 2 a.m., a figure emerged from the shadows. It wasn't an animal. It was a woman. She moved carefully, as if afraid of being seen. Her clothes were torn, and her long silver hair was messy. But what shocked Ethan the most were her eyes. They glowed faintly, like liquid silver. She took a piece of bread, ate quickly, and then disappeared into the basement. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Who was she? How did she get inside? And why was she hiding in his house? His mind raced with possibilities. A runaway. A thief. But nothing made sense. Her eyes. They weren't normal. And no normal person could move that quietly. Ethan grabbed a flashlight and a baseball bat. His hands tightened around the handle as he walked toward the basement door. He took a deep breath. Then, slowly, he pushed the door open. The basement was dark and cold. Dust floated in the air as he stepped inside. His heart pounded. Then he saw her. She was curled up in the corner, her arms wrapped around herself. When Ethan's flashlight fell on her, she flinched, covering her face as if expecting an attack. "Hey," Ethan said, his voice firm but not unkind. "Who are you? What are you doing in my house?" The woman didn't answer. She only stared at him, her silver eyes reflecting the light. Ethan took a cautious step forward. "Look, I don't want to hurt you, but you need to tell me what's going on." The woman trembled. Then, slowly, she opened her mouth. A few words came out, but they weren't in any language Ethan recognized. He frowned. "I don't understand you." She hesitated, then touched her throat and tried again. Her voice was soft, weak. Help." Ethan's grip on the bat loosened. "She speaks English." Before he could ask anything else, she tried to stand. But as soon as she moved, she collapsed, groaning in pain. Ethan rushed forward on instinct, catching her before she hit the floor. Her body was too light. Her skin was cold. And when his hand brushed against her arm, he felt something strange. A deep cut ran across her shoulder, but instead of red blood, a faint blue liquid seeped from the wound. Ethan's breath caught. "What?" "It's she." She looked up at him, her silver eyes filled with something. Fear, pain, desperation. "Please," she whispered. "Don't. Tell them." Ethan's mind was spinning. Who was them? Why was she so afraid? And what was she hiding? One thing was clear. This woman was not from here. Not from this town. Not from this world. And whatever truth she carried, it was something Ethan wasn't ready for. But it was too late now. He had found her. And whoever was hunting her would come looking soon. Ethan Cole stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what he had just seen. The woman in his basement wasn't normal. Her silver eyes, the strange blue liquid from her wound, and the way she spoke, it was all wrong. She wasn't human. And yet, she was here, weak and afraid, begging for his help. Ethan knew he had two choices. He could call the authorities, report her, and let someone else deal with this problem. Or he could find out the truth. He sighed. "I must be out of my mind." "All right," he said, keeping his voice calm. "I won't tell anyone, but you need to explain what's going on." The woman looked at him with cautious eyes. She didn't seem to fully trust him, but she had no other choice. Slowly, she nodded. Ethan helped her sit up, leaning her against the basement wall. "Can you understand me?" he asked. She hesitated, then touched a small metallic device behind her ear. A tiny hum filled the air. "Yes," she said, her voice clearer now. "I understand you." Ethan blinked. "A translator. Who are you?" he asked. The woman took a shaky breath. "My name is Nyara," she said. "I am not from here." Ethan almost laughed. "No kidding. Where are you from?" he asked. She hesitated, then looked up. "Not from this planet." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had already suspected it, but hearing her say it made it real. "An alien. She's an actual alien." He rubbed his temples. "Okay, you're not from Earth. That explains a lot. But why are you here? And why are you hiding in my basement?" Nyara's expression darkened. "I am being hunted." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "By who?" She looked toward the basement door, as if expecting someone to burst in. "The Veiled Dominion," she whispered. "They control many worlds. They do not allow knowledge to spread. And I know something they don't want anyone to learn." Ethan frowned. "What do you know?" Nyara hesitated. For a moment, it seemed like she wouldn't answer. Then she whispered, "The truth about your people." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "My people? You mean humans?" Nyara nodded. "Yes." She took a deep breath, wincing as pain shot through her shoulder. "Your kind is special, Ethan. More special than you realize. But the Dominion has kept your world hidden, controlled. They do not want humans to discover what they truly are." Ethan's heart pounded. "What are you talking about?" Nyara's silver eyes locked onto his. "Humans were never meant to be weak." Ethan felt a strange shiver go through him. "What does that mean?" Before Nyara could answer, a noise came from outside. A low humming sound, almost like a distant engine. Nyara's face went pale. "They found me." Ethan's stomach twisted. "Who?" "The Dominion." Nyara grabbed his arm. "We have to go. Now." Ethan didn't move. His mind was still racing. "Why should I help her? I don't even know if she's telling the truth." But then he saw her eyes, filled with desperation, fear, and something else. Something real. She wasn't lying. And if what she said was true, then humanity was in danger. Ethan made his decision. He grabbed Nyara's arm and helped her up. "Come on," he said. "I know a way out." Together, they moved toward the basement stairs. The humming outside grew louder. Shadows passed by the windows. They were out of time. And Ethan had just stepped into something far bigger than he had ever imagined. Ethan's heart pounded as he helped Nyara up the stairs. The humming sound outside was growing louder, filling the night with an eerie vibration. Someone, or something, was looking for her. "We can't go out the front door," Ethan whispered. "They'll see us." Nyara winced, still weak from her injuries. "Is there another way?" Ethan nodded. "Back door. Leads to the woods." Moving quickly, he guided her through the small hallway, careful not to make noise. He peeked through the blinds. Two figures stood outside. They wore dark, armored suits, their helmets smooth and featureless. Even in the dim light, Ethan could see the faint blue glow pulsing from their weapons. "They're here," Nyara whispered. Her silver eyes darkened with fear. Ethan swallowed hard. "What do they want from you?" Nyara hesitated, as if unsure whether to tell him the truth. But there was no time for secrets. She looked into his eyes. "It's not just me they want. It's what I know." Ethan frowned. "You said something about humans being special. What does that mean?" Nyara's hands trembled as she pressed against the wall, trying to steady herself. "Your kind was never meant to be like this," she said softly. "Weak. Isolated. Forgotten." Ethan's pulse quickened. "Forgotten." Nyara nodded, A long time ago, humans were part of something greater. You were explorers, warriors, scientists. Your people stood among the stars. She took a deep breath. But the Dominion feared you, so they erased your past. Ethan shook his head. That's impossible. We would know if something like that happened. Nyara's expression was sad. No, you wouldn't. The Dominion made sure of that. They controlled history, wiped out records, destroyed anything that could lead you back to the truth. And when that wasn't enough, she hesitated. They did something worse. Ethan's fingers curled into fists. What did they do? Nyara's voice was barely a whisper. They changed you. Ethan stared at her, his mind struggling to keep up. Changed us? How? Nyara's silver eyes reflected the dim light. They suppressed what made you strong. Your intelligence, your instincts, your abilities. They turned you into something harmless. Ethan felt his breath catch. It sounded crazy, like something out of a bad sci-fi movie. But deep down, something about it felt right. Why? He asked. Nyara glanced toward the window. The figures outside were moving now, scanning the area. Because humans were once their greatest threat, she said. And if you ever remember who you truly are, you will be again. Ethan's skin prickled. This wasn't just about her. This was about all of humanity. A sudden knock at the door made them both freeze. A deep mechanical voice spoke from outside. We know you're in there. Turn over the fugitive, and we will not harm you. Ethan looked at Nyara. She was trembling, but her eyes were determined. She didn't want to be caught. Ethan's mind raced. He had two choices. He could give her up, pretend he never knew anything, and go back to his normal life. Or he could fight. Nyara grabbed his arm. If they take me, they'll erase everything. My memories, my knowledge, and they won't stop with me. Ethan exhaled. He already knew what he had to do. He wasn't going to let them take her. And if what she said was true, if humanity really had been robbed of its past, then he wasn't going to let that truth stay buried. He turned toward the kitchen, where his old toolbox was kept. He was an engineer, a builder, a problem solver. He couldn't fight like a soldier, but he could make something that might give them a chance. Nyara's voice was urgent. What are you doing? Ethan grabbed a handful of metal parts and wires, his mind working fast. Buying us time. The knock came again, harder this time. Last warning. Ethan worked faster. Whatever was coming next, he was ready for it. And for the first time in his life, he felt like he was meant for something bigger. The knocking on the door grew louder. Ethan could feel his heart pounding. The two figures outside weren't ordinary people. They were Dominion enforcers, and they had come for Nyara. We know she is inside, the deep mechanical voice repeated. Open the door. Ethan glanced at Nyara. She was breathing heavily, her silver eyes full of fear. If they take me, they'll erase everything, she whispered. They won't just kill me. They'll make sure no one ever knows the truth. Ethan tightened his grip on the wrench in his hand. He had never been a fighter. He wasn't a soldier. But right now, none of that mattered. He took a deep breath. Think, Ethan. Think. The Dominion enforcers would force their way in soon. He needed a distraction, something to slow them down. His eyes darted to the counter, where a can of paint thinner sat from his last home project. An idea formed in his mind. He grabbed the can and poured a trail of liquid across the wooden floor near the entrance. Nyara watched him. What are you doing? Buying time, Ethan muttered, pulling out a lighter. He held it over the flammable liquid, but didn't ignite it. Not yet. There was a loud thud as the enforcers tried to break the door down. Nyara looked panicked. We need to run. We will, Ethan said. Back door. But first, with a flick of his wrist, he dropped the lighter. Whoosh! A burst of fire roared to life, forming a barrier between them and the door. Smoke curled upward as the flames spread, creating a thick wall of heat. A sharp metallic voice came from outside. Fire detected. Engaging suppression protocol. Ethan didn't wait to see what that meant. He grabbed Nyara's hand and pulled her toward the back exit. They ran through the house, past the kitchen, and toward the door that led to the backyard. But just as Ethan reached for the handle, boom! The front door exploded inward. Ethan turned, shielding his face from the blast. Through the smoke and fire, two dark figures stepped inside. Their suits were sleek and metallic, glowing with blue energy. Their helmets had no faces, just smooth black surfaces that reflected the flames. Nyara gasped. They're using shock armor. They won't stop. Ethan's mind raced. The fire had barely slowed them down. They needed to leave. Now. He threw open the back door, pulling Nyara into the night air. The cool wind hit his face as they sprinted across the yard, heading for the trees beyond his property. Behind them, the enforcers moved fast, too fast. They're catching up, Nyara cried. Ethan cursed under his breath. His legs burned, but he pushed forward, his brain working furiously. There has to be a way to stop them. Think, Ethan. Ahead, the ground sloped downward toward a dried-up creek bed. A narrow bridge stretched across it, an old wooden structure Ethan had never bothered to fix. That gave him an idea. Nyara, go first, he shouted. She hesitated but obeyed, running across the bridge. The old wooden planks creaked under her weight, barely holding together. Ethan was right behind her, but just before he reached the other side, he stopped. With one hard kick, he smashed the weakest plank. The bridge collapsed behind him, sending broken wood tumbling into the dry creek bed below. The enforcers skidded to a stop at the edge, their glowing suits flickering in the darkness. Ethan panted, his hands on his knees. That should slow them down. Nyara looked at him, eyes wide. You saved us. For now, Ethan said. He glanced back at the enforcers. They weren't leaving. They stood on the other side of the broken bridge, watching, waiting. They're not giving up, Nyara whispered. Ethan nodded. No, they're not. Nyara turned to him, her expression serious. You don't have to do this, Ethan. You don't have to help me. Ethan exhaled, looking at the night sky above them. Everything had changed in just a few hours. His quiet, normal life was gone. He had stepped into something far bigger than himself. And yet, something inside him felt right. He turned to Nyara and said, if what you told me is true, if humanity really has been changed, if we were meant for something more. He clenched his fists. Then I can't walk away. Nyara stared at him for a moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. The truth is bigger than both of us, she said. Ethan looked back at the enforcers, who were already scanning for another way across. We need to move, he said. And we need a plan. Because this wasn't over. It was just the beginning. The broken bridge had given them a few extra minutes, but Ethan knew it wouldn't be enough. The enforcers were still watching from the other side, their glowing suits flickering in the darkness. They weren't turning back. They were waiting. They're scanning for another way across, Nyara said, her breath uneven. They won't stop. Ethan wiped the sweat from his forehead. His heart was still pounding from the chase, but he forced himself to think clearly. What do they want? He asked. If they already erased humanity's history, why are they after you now? Nyara hesitated, looking at the sky. The stars were bright tonight, uncaring of the battle happening below them. I found something, she said softly. Something they missed. A record. An old transmission that proves the truth about humans. Ethan's mind raced. A record. If that was true, it meant evidence still existed, something that could expose the Dominion's lies. He took a deep breath. Where is it? Nyara met his gaze. It's hidden, not far from here. If we can reach it, we might have a chance. Ethan clenched his fists. The enforcers would be after them soon. They needed to move. All right, he said. Lead the way. The forest path. The two of them hurried deeper into the forest, their footsteps light on the damp earth. Tall trees surrounded them, casting long shadows in the moonlight. The night was quiet, except for the distant hum of the enforcers' scanning devices. Nyara moved quickly despite her injuries. Ethan could tell she had done this before, running, hiding, staying one step ahead. "What's in the record?" he asked as they walked. Nyara took a deep breath. "A message," she said, "from humans, a long time ago, before the Dominion took over. They sent a warning, a call to arms." Ethan's stomach tightened. A warning about what? Nyara's silver eyes flickered in the darkness. That humans would one day return. That no matter what the Dominion did, they couldn't erase your true nature. Ethan's mind swirled with questions, but before he could speak, Nyara grabbed his arm. "Stop," she whispered. Ethan froze. He followed her gaze and saw a drone hovering in the trees. It was small, nearly silent, its metal body reflecting the moonlight. A blue light pulsed on its surface, scanning the area. Ethan held his breath. If the drone detected them, the enforcers would be on them in seconds. Slowly, he reached into his pocket. He still had a small screwdriver from his toolbox. Not much of a weapon, but maybe enough. The drone beeped. It was turning toward them. Ethan acted fast. He threw the screwdriver. Clang! The tool hit the drone's side, knocking it off balance. The machine sputtered, its sensors flickering wildly. Nyara didn't hesitate. She grabbed a rock and smashed it down on the drone, silencing it for good. Ethan let out a breath of relief. "Nice shot." Nyara nodded. "We need to keep moving." The hidden truth. After another 10 minutes of running, they reached a small clearing. In the center stood a crumbling stone monument, covered in moss and dirt. It looked ancient, forgotten. Nyara knelt beside it and began brushing away the dirt. "It's here," she murmured. Ethan crouched beside her. "You hid the record here." Nyara shook her head. "No, it was already here. I just found it." With one last sweep of her hand, the surface of the stone was revealed, and Ethan saw strange carvings. Symbols, letters, words that looked almost familiar. He ran his fingers over them. "This is human writing," Nyara finished. "Old. From before the Dominion came." Ethan's throat went dry. If this was real, if these words were truly from the past, it changed everything. Nyara pressed her hand against the stone, activating a small hidden panel. A faint hum filled the air. Then, from inside the monument, a small metallic disc slid out. She held it up. "This is the record." Ethan's hands curled into fists. "We need to show this to the world." Nyara's expression was grim. "That's exactly why the Dominion wants to stop us." Before Ethan could respond, a low hum filled the air. He turned sharply. The enforcers had found them. Beyond the trees, glowing blue lights flickered. Shadows moved in the darkness. "They're here," Nyara whispered. Ethan clenched his jaw. No more running. No more hiding. It was time to fight back. Ethan's grip tightened around the metallic disc. This small object held the truth about humanity's lost past. And now, the Dominion enforcers were here to take it. The trees around them flickered with blue light. The enforcers were closing in, moving like shadows through the darkness. Their armor hummed with power, their faceless helmets reflecting the moonlight. Nyara crouched beside Ethan, breathing heavily. "We can't outrun them this time." Ethan swallowed hard. He knew she was right. They had spent the entire night running, escaping just in time. But the enforcers were relentless. They wouldn't stop. Not unless Ethan made them. His mind raced. He wasn't a fighter. He wasn't a soldier. He was just an engineer, a problem solver. But maybe that was enough. He turned to Nyara. "How strong is their armor?" Nyara frowned. "It's made to resist bullets and explosions." "Why?" Ethan looked at the broken drone they had taken down earlier. Its small circuits still flickered weakly. An idea formed in his mind. If we can't break them, he muttered, maybe we can disable them. Nyara's eyes widened. You have a plan. Ethan nodded. But we need to move. Now. Setting the trap. Ethan grabbed the broken drone and ran toward a large tree with thick roots. Nyara followed, staying low as the enforcers drew closer. Using quick hands, Ethan ripped open the drone's wiring, exposing the power core. He worked fast, pulling out pieces, twisting wires, rewiring the system to overload. Ethan, Nyara whispered urgently. They're almost here. Just a second, he muttered. His fingers moved faster. Sparks flew from the drone's core as he finished connecting the last wire. He turned to Nyara. When I say now, cover your ears. She didn't question him. The enforcers stepped into the clearing. Their glowing suits cast eerie shadows on the trees. You cannot escape, one of them announced in a cold, robotic voice. Surrender the fugitive and the artifact. Ethan didn't surrender. Instead, he threw the drone's core at their feet and shouted, now. Nyara covered her ears. Boom. A wave of high-pitched energy burst from the core. The sound was piercing, vibrating through the air like an explosion of static electricity. The enforcers staggered. Their suits flickered wildly, their glowing lights fading in and out. Sparks erupted from their armor as the energy wave overloaded their systems. One enforcer dropped to his knees, his suit shutting down completely. The other stumbled backward, trying to reboot his systems. Ethan's plan had worked. He had short-circuited their armor. Nyara's eyes widened. Ethan, that was incredible. Ethan didn't have time to celebrate. Come on. We need to go before they recover. The final stretch. Ethan and Nyara ran through the trees, heading toward the old highway beyond the forest. If they could reach the road, they might have a chance to escape for good. Behind them, the remaining enforcer struggled to move. His suit was still malfunctioning, but it wouldn't last forever. We're almost there, Nyara panted. The trees thinned, and suddenly, they burst out onto the highway. The road stretched into the distance, empty and quiet. Ethan scanned the area. We need a vehicle, something fast. Nyara pointed ahead. There. A rusty old truck sat near an abandoned gas station. It looked ancient, but it was their only chance. Ethan sprinted toward it. He yanked open the door and jumped inside. Nyara climbed in beside him. Ethan pulled down the sun visor. The keys fell into his lap. Yes. He shoved them into the ignition and turned. The engine coughed, then roared to life. Hold on, he shouted. The chase begins. Ethan floored the gas pedal, and the truck lurched forward, tires screeching against the asphalt. The wind howled as they sped down the empty road. Nyara looked back. Her expression turned to fear. He's coming. Ethan glanced in the mirror. The enforcer was running after them, and he was fast. Even with his armor damage, he was gaining. The blue glow of his suit flickered, but his determination never wavered. Ethan gritted his teeth. He's not giving up. Nyara's hands clenched around the metallic disc. We have to protect this. Ethan looked at her. This was the key to everything. The truth about humanity. The proof that the Dominion had tried to erase. And now it was in their hands. But if the enforcer caught them, it would all be over. Ethan pushed the truck harder, the engine roaring against the night. The highway stretched ahead like a path into the unknown. They weren't just running anymore. They were fighting for the future. And this time, Ethan wasn't going to lose. The truck raced down the empty highway, its old engine roaring as Ethan pushed it to the limit. Beside him, Nyara clutched the metallic disc, the only proof that humanity's past had not been erased. Behind them, the enforcer was still coming. His armor flickered with broken light, but he wasn't slowing down. He was gaining. Ethan gritted his teeth. He's too fast. Nyara turned, gripping the door handle. If we don't stop him now, we'll never escape. Ethan's mind worked furiously. The truck was too slow. The enforcer would catch up in seconds. He needed to think, fast. Then he saw it. Ahead, the road split into a collapsed bridge over a deep canyon. Half the structure had crumbled, leaving a gap too wide for the truck to jump. Ethan's heart pounded. This was their chance. "Nyara, hold on," he shouted. The leap of faith. Ethan swerved hard, aiming the truck toward the edge of the bridge. The enforcer was almost at their tail, reaching for the truck's back bumper. Ethan took a deep breath. At the last second, he slammed the brakes. The truck screeched to a stop. The sudden force sent the enforcer flying forward. His damaged armor couldn't adjust in time. He went over the edge. For a brief second, he hovered in the air. His glowing visor flickered as if realizing what had happened. Then, he dropped, down into the canyon below. Silence. Ethan let out a long breath. We did it. Nyara exhaled shakily. That was insane. They had survived. But the fight wasn't over. Delivering the truth. Ethan and Nyara couldn't rest yet. The Dominion would send more enforcers. If they wanted to change the future, they had to move. Nyara held up the disc. We need to broadcast this, to let people see the truth. Ethan nodded. Where? Nyara thought for a moment. Then she smiled. There's an old satellite tower nearby. If we can reach it, we can send the message across the network. Ethan started the truck again. Then let's go. They sped off, leaving the canyon behind. The broadcast. The satellite tower stood tall against the night sky. It was abandoned, rusted, and covered in vines. But it still had power. Ethan parked the truck near the entrance. You sure this will work? Nyara jumped out, gripping the disc. It has to. Inside, they climbed the metal stairs to the control room. Dust covered the screens, but the main console still glowed faintly. Nyara inserted the disc into the system. The screen flickered to life, displaying ancient data. Then, a voice filled the room. To any survivors, if you hear this, remember, humanity is not lost. The truth cannot be erased. Fight for your future. Ethan's breath caught. It was a message from the past, a voice from long ago, left behind to remind them of who they truly were. Nyara quickly activated the global transmission. The message spread across old channels, underground networks, even into the Dominion systems. For the first time in centuries, the truth was free. The aftermath. Ethan and Nyara stood on the tower's rooftop, looking at the horizon. The world had changed in an instant. People who had believed the Dominion's lies now knew the truth. Humanity had not been weak. Humanity had not been erased. And now, humanity would rise again. Nyara turned to Ethan, her silver eyes filled with hope. We did it. Ethan smiled. Yeah, but this is just the beginning. Far in the distance, Dominion ships were moving. They knew what had happened, and they wouldn't stay silent for long. But this time, Ethan and Nyara wouldn't run. They would fight. For the future, for humanity, for the truth, and nothing would stop them. The end.